You're listening to the ESO Network, your station for all things geek.
Hello, world, and welcome to Tales from Hollywoodland, a veritable feast of movies, television, Broadway, showbiz stories, and even a little bit of news and gossip. With Julian Schlossberg, Arthur E. Friedman, Stephen J. Rubin, and hey, I'm Meathead himself, Mike Faber. Today, we remember director and actor Rob Reiner. And now, here's Steve.
Hey, everybody. This is the news we heard about Rob Reiner may have been the most shocking news I've heard in Hollywood in years. And I call it a what incident, because when you hear it, you say, what? And, you know, people die every day. And certainly people in show business die every day. But I think that the shock to the system, because Rob was truly beloved by everybody. I mean, not only for his films, his iconic films, but for his political stances. He was willing to stand up for a number of issues, he and his wife both. And I told Mike and Julian and Arthur, we got to do a show about Rob, because this is a man who will be toasted forever for many reasons. Julian, you actually were one of the last people to interview him.
I was. We did 2 shows together, and I had met him years ago when he was married to Penny Marshall, his first wife. And Carl, I was involved with because I produced the movie 10 from Your Show of Shows. So we had a lot to talk about, and we did. Actually, I tried to hire him to be an actor at one point in a play, and the big thing that happened with us that I never forgot, he called me. We didn't know each other well at all. And he called me to ask if he wanted to open a new company called Castle Rock. And since my company was Castle Hill, he was wondering, would I mind that he did that? Because that's where the kids went at Castle Rock in the movie, I guess, Stand By Me. Anyhow, I said to him, I'm thrilled to have you do it, because they're going to mix me up with you, and you're going to do much bigger movies than I have. So I was happy to have him call it Castle Rock and didn't protest at all.
The impression I got from him was just a regular guy you could sit down and talk about anything with, and was very smart.
He was, and he had real taste too. And he really paid his dues. If you want to look at somebody in show business who started really small, doing bit parts as an actor, and then working with the Smothers Brothers as a writer, and then starting to direct at the, he really did it all as far as coming up, despite the fact that his father was famous. And I said to him on one of the shows, I said, was it a double-edged sword? And he said, sure. He said, but he said he was just glad that when his father finally thought he had done something exceptional. He had directed a John Paul Sartre play called No Exit, and his father came to see it and said, "You're going to be okay. You'll be okay." Up until then, Rob said he was very nervous about him going into show business. And Carl Reiner was probably the greatest straight man that we've ever seen. I mean, he was just unbelievable. And I said to Rob, you were kind of the straight man with Carol O'Connor on All in the Family. He said, you're right. I never thought of that, but I really was. So
I was having lunch with a friend of mine named Larry Bresner some years ago in Maple Drive, where these guys officed. Larry was partners with Buddy Moore, wonderful guy, producer, David Steinberg, not the comedian. We were talking, having lunch, and Rob came in and just joined us. He knew Larry, didn't know me, but we had lunch together. And I came away from that lunch saying to myself, Rob Reiner is Rob Reiner. He is exactly the guy you would think he is. Steve, you just mentioned what you thought, that he was a great guy, perfect, as real as could be. Now, this guy directed some of the greatest movies ever made, starting with A Few Good Men. He directed that. He obviously directed the scene with Nicholson in the courtroom. That's his work. And he tells the story, of course, of how Nicholson ran through that scene with everybody who was in it. He just did it 5 or 6 times, and he did it the same exact way as he did it when it was finally time to do the scene. Everybody was so taken by Nicholson, but he wasn't taken with anything. He was a professional and worked it. But think of the stuff that Rob Reiner directed, guys. He directed some great movies. And when he was in a movie as an actor, he was the same guy that I had lunch with that time.
He was, his film slate is so eclectic in terms of styles. I mean, he does drama, he does comedy, he does fantasy with The Princess Bride. I mean, he
does Misery, which is one of the most frightening films of all time.
Right, exactly. I think he teamed well with Aaron Sorkin. I think Aaron Sorkin, who wrote A Few Good Men, and who later wrote The American President, I think they teamed well together. That's one of the great tragedies, because Rob Reiner had more films in him, and probably great films.
I would say I saw A Few Good Men on Broadway, and the Nicholson role at that time was played by a fine actor named Stephen Lang, who was really terrific in it as well. But when I saw Nicholson, I thought, boy, it doesn't get better than this. It just does not. You believed he was Colonel Jessup. You believed it. It was just sensational.
It's interesting, Julian, because my friends and I are always talking about how the star system is over, that movie star, they don't really sell movies anymore because nobody goes to the movies to see stars. We used to go see a John Wayne movie or a Cary Grant movie. But I have to say that you get an actor like Jack Nicholson in a role like that, it transcends the screen. I mean, it makes everybody riveted. There are still actors who can really sell a movie and get people coming back again.
How about Tom Cruise's performance in that film?
Very strong. It's
very underrated actor.
Very much so. Whenever Tom Cruise is in a film, and I'm not talking about the Top Gun movies, but he always seems to take a little bit of a back seat. I mean, he's terrific in Rain Man. And
in Rain Man, he's playing 1.5 roles.
Right.
And he does it great. And Dustin thought he was terrific. He just loved working with him. He told me how much he respected this guy and how prepared he was, and how he said he's going to be much bigger than he is now. And he was pretty big then.
So true.
He would be the only guy around today that would compare with the dozen or so huge movie stars of 60, 70 years ago. Where you would go to see people go to see a Tom Cruise movie because he's in it, and that's why he's the biggest box office draw today.
And then you take a movie like When Harry Met Sally, and I mean, this guy really could do it. And as Steve pointed out, he could do any kind of movie. He wasn't just an action director or a comedy director. He could do it all. And when you think of those movies, Harry Met Sally and The American President and A Few Good Men, I mean, as Arthur said earlier, it doesn't get better than this commercially and also quality, both.
And that's in my household, they're on repeat. I don't mind watching them and again because it's like watching them from the beginning. I think Stand By Me spoke to me as just remembering my youth, and Stand By Me, which Rob had said was his favorite movie. Did he say that to you, Julian?
No, he didn't. I didn't ask it, and he didn't say it.
Okay.
But that's interesting to hear.
Yeah, because Stephen King also told him that it was his favorite adaptation of one of his books. Although yes. I think in his case, it was a novella. I think it was a novella. It was a short story, originally called The Body, but obviously they couldn't put it out as The Body because that sounds like a horror movie.
Was
Well,
Stephen King
I
Misery
grew up
too?
with Marie McDonald being known as the Body.
Murder
you
the
go.
Body. Yeah.
What did you ask, Arthur?
Was Stephen King Misery?
Stephen King also was Misery. In fact,
Yeah.
after they completed Stand By Me together, Stephen was delighted to option the rights to Misery to Rob, and that was his
One of the
next
things
film.
about Rob is he was really a sweet guy. He was that, and in any interview, including Julian's, he came across as a sweet guy, funny, very funny, but a very sweet guy. And to think that he would be chosen to direct Misery, I mean, that picture was as scary as anything I've ever seen. You would be my last guess, you know.
He did talk, Arthur, about the fact that he and Barry Sonnenfeld I interviewed as well, and they talked about the fact that Jimmy Caan did not take well to lying in bed. He's a guy with a lot of energy, and he was getting really annoyed at just having to lie there, not be able to do what Sonny Corleone is known to do.
Was Caan his first choice, do you know?
I don't think so. I think everybody passed. Nobody wanted to be second to Kathy Bates. They didn't want to do it. I know that he danced with Warren Beatty for a while. They went to everybody, and they all turned it down. But let's talk about The Princess Bride, because how about that movie? He did tell me, guys, that Carl, his father, gave him the book as a little boy, and he wanted to do it. But Goldman had written the script, and he couldn't get anybody interested. And then he had some success with Spinal Tap and Stand By Me. And he says he's meeting with Dawn Steele at, I guess, Paramount at that time. And she says, whatever you want to do, we want to do with you. And he said, well, there is something I want to do. And he said, the Princess Bride. She said, anything but that. Anyone but that.
What was the prejudice against that project, Julian?
It seemed that everybody had worked on it. Redford owned it for a while. Truffaut had it for a while. Goldman had finally sold it to 20th Century Fox for $500,000 in those days, which is a lot of money. And they had Richard Lester, the guy who directed the Beatle movies, Hard Day's Night and Help. And then, of course, management changed. And when management changes at the studio, stuff gets thrown out. And then Rob was able to negotiate owning it. And that was his first movie that he produced and directed. It was interesting, too. We talked about the casting, and I said, Andre the Giant, what a great idea. He said we were so worried about his health that we had backed him up with Arnold Schwarzenegger to play it. I said, well, based on that, who did you back up Wally Shawn with? And he immediately said Danny DeVito. So
that's perfect. Little Wally Shawn, he's so great.
Yeah.
You know, we talk movies, and our audience who's not in the movie business or in the entertainment industry, we all take for granted, I guess. You see a movie and you see it, and you accept for people who are in it. What goes on in casting and choosing, and who turns things down and who says yes and who says no. Boy, that is something that relates to almost every movie ever made. Barry Levinson told me the story of how he got Rain Man. It was around. There were many scripts. They brought him into United Artists MGM to talk about it, and he said, "Well, I don't know. Let me think." They had Dustin Hoffman set, I think. But anyway, they gave him about 25 scripts to take home and read over the weekend. So he'd come back and make a decision as to whether he were going to direct it or not. He read the 25 scripts over the weekend. He came back and he said, the best script you got here is the very first one. And that's the script they did, the first script.
Well, that's kind of the problem with Hollywood today, is that they hire a writer, he writes a screenplay, and then they replace him. The person who brought the passion and the excitement and all of the originality gets tossed out. And what do we end up with? we end up with movies that don't work.
Mm.
Being a writer myself, we're all writers actually. The writer is king.
Well,
The first writer in any project there's a special thing that goes on, but everybody who comes in, I don't care if it's a writer, the actor, whoever it may be, has a different idea. Well, let's try this. Let's try this. Let's try this. And
Rob was certainly a director who enjoyed the collaboration with writers. You didn't go to a Rob Reiner set and find out the writer was not invited. I got the impression either with Nora Ephron on When Harry Met Sally or with Aaron Sorkin with the other movies that they worked hand in hand. And that's a quality that isn't as universal as you think.
No, it's quite the opposite. Many directors bar the writer from the set. They don't want them there. And the reason they don't want them most of the time is the actors tend to run over and ask them questions, because after all, they created it, not the director. So they don't want that competition. I asked them about All in the Family, and how did he go from pretty obscurity? I mean, you got to remember, All in the Family was the #1 show in America for 5 years in a row. #1. It never dropped. It had 40 million people watching it. Now, if you have a show that has 8 or 9 million people, you think you've got a huge hit on your hands. But in those days, everybody watched the same time on the same day. There was no DVRs, there was no delays, there wasn't any of that. And so it became more a homogenized country in a way, because the next day at the water fountain or at lunch, you talked about All in the Family because everybody was watching. And I said, how did you do going from obscurity to so famous? And he said the best thing that happened to him was growing up with his father, who also was well known, and he could see how his father would handle the public, and he started to. But
his father's friends.
Yeah, and his father's friends. But he said a very funny thing. He said at one point, this show was so popular that if he had won the Pulitzer Prize, they said the headline would say, Meathead wins the Pulitzer Prize.
Well, that was the good news, bad news. The good news, you're on a hit show. The bad news is everybody calls you Meathead.
Yeah, pretty bad. That's pretty bad.
I was working with Robert Redford on his movie A River Runs Through It, and came into the tail end of a conversation into his office when he was telling Rob that he had decided that he was not going to do American President. And that came pretty late because they were already cast up. They were in motion. But Redford's decision was based upon, he thought it was a little too political, didn't want to get involved, even though he was very political.
Arthur, I heard that Rob wanted to add more humor to the presidency in that movie, and that Bob wanted to keep it a little bit more serious. Did you hear that at all?
No, not at all. What I heard, what I asked about, and what I heard was that it was the political aspects of it, which, when you think about it, as 1994 thereabout, and here we are 30 years later, and nothing has changed. Speaking of politics for a second, but that the gun rules and stuff, nothing changed. He felt he still had about 3 or 4 movies he wanted to do as an actor. That was his thought, and he just didn't want to get involved in the politics of it, and lose perhaps half an audience. Which, by the way, Buddy Hackett once told me he never got involved with politics. Don Rickles was the same thing, because they always figured you lose half the audience if you get into politics. Unlike the Mort Sauls and Mike Nichols and all these people who got into politics and weighed on it. But the main reason was politics. And to Rob's credit, he went out and he got Michael Douglas, who was great, and it's a great movie.
Oh yeah, no, totally. I've probably seen it 40 times. It offers you the dream president for my money, a president who thinks.
Yes, well,
That is true fantasy these days.
it's an endangered species.
Oh my goodness, but it's a very funny movie. I have to say that some of the stuff is Aaron Sorkin winking a little bit at the camera. There's a moment where President Shepard, the Michael Douglas character, wants to order flowers for Annette Bening, and he wants to do it himself. He doesn't want to have an assistant do it. So he lifts up the telephone and he says, "How do I get an outside line?" That was one of the moments I just didn't totally believe.
One of the great little lines in that movie is really a little moment, but it was a moment when she's on the sofa with him at Camp David and at Benningham, and she says something to the effect that I'm going to hide. I'll leave you and I'll hide. And the look on Michael's face was perfect when he says to her, we'd find you. Meaning that he's got the Secret Service, he's got everything. You're never going to hide away from the president. Great movie, one of my favorite movies of all time, American President.
Oh yeah, no question about it, and has a wonderful supporting cast, including Martin Sheen, who would later become the president when they did West Wing. Once again, Aaron Sorkin's shows. So yeah, no, there were a lot of really good. And Michael J. Fox. Apparently, Michael J. Fox had to hide the fact that he was starting to show symptoms of Parkinson's. He was very nervous that they would toss him off the movie, and fortunately, he had a little tremor in one of his hands, and he was able to disguise it. And because Michael J. Fox is the heart of that movie, he's wonderful. He's the kind of the comic relief too, because they're driving to an appointment in the limousine, in the convoy, and all of a sudden, President Shepard spots the flower shop he ordered the flowers from. And he says to his driver, "Excuse me, I'm going to step out now." And Michael J. Fox has this horrified look. No, you can't step out. No, I'm just going to hop out. No hopping, Mr. President.
No hopping. Yeah.
And Shepard says, "You mean to think that there might be an assassin waiting for me in that flower shop just on the idle chance I'll stop to get flowers?" That's very funny.
Well, let's ask this question here, guys. So why do we not see any more American presidents? Why we talk about it all the time. How do you not make more American presidents?
What do you mean in terms of sequels or what? What are you talking about?
No, in terms of the heartwarming romantic comedy. That picture did nothing but business.
You don't have that many Aaron Sorkins, number one, to start out with. I mean, sadly, we just don't. And we have a studio system that's quite excited about tentpole movies, and this is not a tentpole movie in their heads. If I can, This Is Spinal Tap, because I have to say that in my career, it's very rare that I've fallen out of a seat laughing, but I fell out of a seat because I had just co-produced and co-directed a movie called No Nukes for Warner Brothers, and I had all the rock and rollers. I learned about rock and roll time. I learned so much that when I watched that movie, in a way, I was thinking, wow, I'm really reliving the last year that I worked on No Nukes with all of, Bruce Springsteen, Tom Petty, everybody was in it, Carly Simon, James Taylor, the Doobie Brothers, Micah McDonald, everybody. And but it was interesting to watch it. And there's another example of him playing a straight man. He plays Marty, the documentary man, the guy making the movie. And he said on my show that it was Scorsese's The Last Waltz that gave him the feeling of permission to be a director in the movie, because that's what Scorsese does in The Last Waltz. So
he was very forthcoming and very interesting to listen to about
Just
his stories.
Julian, just curious. In the No Nukes, how close did you get with Springsteen? Do you have any kind of
not close. I mean, I certainly saw him. We talked, but we were not close. John Landau was his manager, and that's where I spent more time with. But my co-director and co-producer was Danny Goldberg, who had run many record companies as president. So he really did a lot. I was more involved in the making of the movie than I was with the rock and rollers, except a little bit with Graham Nash and with Bonnie Raitt. I did become a friend, and Jackson Browne, those three.
How difficult for you was it to secure financing for No Nukes?
Well, there was a company called Muse, called the Musicians United for Safe Energy, and they had the budget, and they hired a documentary filmmaker named Barbara Koppel, a very famous one, who did Harlan County, USA. And she was a good friend of mine, and she called me and said, would you produce this movie? And I flew to New York, and I was in LA at that time, and met, and I agreed to do it. And so that's how that happened. They had the financing, Steve.
Let's talk about some of the movies Rob was in as an actor. Example, When Harry Met Sally, or Sleepless in Seattle, I should say. He was great. He was great as an actor. He was a Rob Reiner. He became, that kind of a character. I loved his working with Bruno Kirby in some things. I love Bruno Kirby, boys. I love Bruno. But Rob Reiner, is sitting at the bar with Tom Hanks in Sleepless in Seattle. It was all perfect stuff. That stuff was written, by the way, Steve, by David Ward.
Right, of course.
All the Hank stuff.
When Harry Met Sally was pretty much a true collaboration, because some of it was based on his own personal experiences as being very depressed, going through a divorce. I guess it was after he was divorced from Penny Marshall, and then Efron. What's Efron's first name? Julie? Nora also brought a lot of her own shtick to Sally. The whole idea of being very specific on how she ordered a sandwich. And I read that it was Meg Ryan's idea to take a conversation about an orgasm and then actually have one in the restaurant. That was her idea. And I guess that restaurant still exists, and you can walk into it. And
Katz's Deli is you.
Katz's Deli, and it says, there's a thing on the table says, when Harry met Sally, I'll have what she had.
Which was Rob's mother.
Estelle Reiner. That was just very, very fun.
Arthur mentioned the acting. I mean, again, I'm talking about paying your dues. If you look at Rob's acting credits in television, he's in Batman, he's in That Girl, he's in Andy Griffith's show, he's in the Partridge Family. He's acting everywhere. He's all over the place, learning, as he said, the craft of acting by doing it. It was interesting that he had.
You guys ever see his interview with his friend from high school and lifelong friend, Albert Brooks? He interviewed him.
He directed that documentary.
He directed it and interviewed him. And I think it took place in Musso Frank's, the restaurant.
It was in Los Angeles. That's right.
Yeah, it was great, though.
Yeah. He did a movie, I don't know if you guys saw it, really a powerful film called The Ghost of Mississippi. Very strong movie, very strong. And talk about real emotional film. That's it.
Was that about those Klan slayings?
Yeah, yes. And it's just a sensational film. Probably didn't do anywhere near the business Few Good Men and Harry Met Sally did, but really a terrific movie. Also, he actually did The Bucket List. Do you remember that?
Yes, good movie. Whoa, hey, a big hit.
And that expression entered the vernacular.
A friend of our family wrote that. It was his first script.
Really? What a great beginning.
Great beginning. Great beginning.
What's the second script?
What
Else did he write?
I don't remember the name. It was
years ago, it would have been The Son of the Bucket.
That's right.
Getting back to When Harry Met Sally, there's movies that are on heavy rotation. That movie never gets old. I'm going to ask Mike, because Mike is a good weather vane for movies. Mike, you really liked that movie, didn't you?
Oh, of course I did. It was just a wonderful, wonderful film. And, the things with Rob Reiner's films, it's just, they are so different, like you guys have been saying. And his work is so varied, but each one has the little Reinerisms that he puts into it. And that was one of the things I loved about it. And one of the, movies that I always think about, other than Princess Bride and A Few Good Men, comes to my mind was, of course, Spinal Tap. And, with Spinal Tap, he just didn't direct it. He also was one of the stars of it because, it was a mockumentary and he was the documentarian in this one. And it was just so well done. And he actually recaptured it recently with Spinal Tap 2, which came out last September. And, I think it's his last film that he made.
It was his last film, yes. So. He told a wonderful story about being a 14-year-old and going to the set of his father's show, the Dick Van Dyke Show. He said at 14, his passion for women was flowing through him. And there's a 25-year-old Mary Tyler Moore with a sensational figure in capri pants. And he said he's not proud of this, but she told the story on David Letterman, so he told it on my show. He went over and he grabbed her tush. And Carl said, "Come here, I got to talk to you." And he said, "Did you just grab Mary Tyler Moore's tush?" And Rob said, "Yeah, I did." He said, "Well, don't ever do that again." So
I'm curious, what was Mary's reaction?
Well, years later, they had a reunion of the Dick Van Dyke Show. He's no longer a 14-year-old kid. He's a very important director and very well known. And at one point, she sees him, Mary Tyler Moore, and he goes over and he says, "I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened. I was a 14-year-old. I apologize." And he said, Mary Tyler Moore bent down and he grabbed her again. And she said, "Oh, Rob," what she used to say on the show. And then he had set the whole thing up. I said, "Is that on film anywhere?" He said, "I don't think so." I said, "That would really be viral. That would go viral."
Today, if somebody grabs somebody's tush on a set, it would be on video, audio, internet. It would be
and that person would be on unemployment.
Exactly. Yeah. These days, you can't get away with anything because everybody has a camera.
That's right.
Every filmmaker, I don't think there's anyone that doesn't have a history of having at least one bomb. And Rob Reiner had a bomb or two. One of his bombs was North. Anybody remember the movie?
Remember the title?
Literally nobody went and saw it. And so he always would make fun of that. It happens. But it happens to the best of them. I mean, it happened to Billy Wilder. It happened to Hitchcock. It happened to the best of them. They can't seem to escape it, no matter how good a director they are. Did he have another anything other than that bomb, Julian? Do you recall?
Oh yes, there are a couple. His last movies were not successful. There was a few of them. I don't know how LBJ did. I don't think it did very well.
Speaking of which, I just saw it the other night. Unbelievable.
Good
I
movie.
was watching something on Netflix, and then they said if you like this, and you probably like that, and it's LBJ with Woody
Harrelson
as LBJ. Uh, Jennifer Jason Leigh played a very good Lady Bird. I watched the whole movie. I thought it was pretty good. I'm not sure that Woody Harrelson was the best LBJ I could ever find. Didn't you tell me that you saw a Randy Quaid LBJ once?
I saw Randy Quaid do it on a TV movie. He was superb.
Yeah.
But he actually physically looks like him. Woody Harrelson looks like his son, not him.
Yeah.
And also I saw on stage Lawrence Luckinbill do it and did a beautiful job. So
I'm trying to remember that very the movie The Butler. They had a number of actors portraying various presidential figures. I want to say that Alan Rickman played LBJ, but I have to look it up. It was an odd.
Well, I'll tell you. I think Bryan Cranston did.
I'm going to look it up right now.
On Broadway. I think I saw
it. It has
it.
nothing to do with Rob Reiner, but I happened to see, guys, the other day, a movie I wanted to see, and I finally got to see it, which was Nuremberg.
Good movie.
A good movie. Well done. And Russell Crowe, I thought was outstanding. I was shocked by the ending. I really was. That he really was one of them. The whole movie seems to be that maybe he wasn't, maybe he's a good man, and it turns out that he was one of them. That question by the British guy, a strong, strong film. Anyway.
Well, it's interesting to also note that he told me that he worked for Otto Preminger as a writer. Otto was making a movie with every name in the world that was as bad a movie as you'll ever see, called Skidoo. You guys remember?
Oh boy, I sure do.
And what had happened was Otto was taken to the Troubadour in L.A., where Rob had real long hair, was kind of like a hippie at that point, was a hippie of Beverly Hills before he became well known. And Reiner was hired by Otto to write what the hippies would say in Skidoo. So it was kind of fun that
it wasn't Alan Rickman. Liev Schreiber played Lyndon B. Johnson.
Yeah, that could work.
But the interesting casting in that movie was Dwight Eisenhower was played by Robin Williams.
No.
Well, he played Teddy Roosevelt, so why not?
Yeah. Teddy Roosevelt I could see, but wow, that's a stretch. Another little tidbit on Rob Reiner is for our listening audience. He's a big sports fan, big Dodger fan. Oh boy.
And he was a good ball player, good baseball player.
He was a great space from the Bronx, so yeah. Kingsbridge Road, all that area gave birth to a lot of guys.
He lived on the Grand Concourse for a while.
Lived on the Concourse, not far from where you used to live.
No, he didn't live far. He lived around Marshall Loop Parkway.
That area. Yeah.
It's interesting too about he's told a story when he was a kid. Carl Reiner, his dad, was a regular, of course, on Show of Shows with Sid Caesar, and then he went with Sid to Caesar's Hour. He said the only thing was that even though he was on both those shows, they didn't have a television. They didn't have a TV. And finally Estelle Reiner said, look, we're not watching you. You got to get a TV. So I bought a television. But it took years to get that TV. So.
You're kidding me. You're saying by the mid-50s or early 50s?
Well, it would be the mid-50s.
That they didn't have a TV in their home. That's wow. Right.
So that is kind of ironic that you got a guy who's co-starring on television, but they can't watch it.
Kind of hard to picture a world without television, but I'm sure both of you probably do remember that.
Oh, it was a wonderful world because it stimulated your imagination. You're on the range with the Lone Ranger. You're walking down the steps to Jack Benny's vault, and what you could do was to really imagine it. Television changed that. It spoon-fed you. Your imagination couldn't run wild. I feel that it was the biggest gift I had as a child to have grown up on radio and then television.
There was nothing quite like it.
Well, here's something funny. On February 28th, which is probably before the show aired, and Michael probably cut this out, but debuting my sound movie, Spacemen from Planet Judy, in a theater at the Golden State Film Festival, and we're going to have an audience listening. I can't say people are coming to a screening; they're coming to a listening. And I'm hoping to pack the audience. So there's a little throwback to 30s radio pre-television.
I like that.
And all podcasts are a throwback. That's what they are.
We are definitely throwbacks. I just hope they don't throw us back.
Well, there has been talk, Steve. There's been talk.
When you were interviewing Rob, Julian, did he talk about anything that was, because usually at the end of the interviews you talk about what's upcoming. Did he mention anything that he wanted to do in the future at all that, obviously, sadly, we won't see?
I think there was a third. I think when they shot the second Spinal Tap, there may have been a third. And I think they were going to bring that out a year later. I don't think the second did well. I don't think it did well. Arthur, do you know if it did?
I don't believe it did. No,
I don't think so. But
let's mention about Rob Reiner that he married Penny Marshall. I mean, that's wow. Think about that. Married Penny Marshall. She was wonderful director and actress. She was great, but Jesus, that's a stretch for me anyway.
There were two young actors. I mean, they were struggling. And she and he tried out together for All in the Family. She didn't get it, but he did.
And then he marries the still photographer on When Harry Met Sally, I believe. Or she was a photographer. I don't know if she was the still photographer on When Harry Met Sally, but then he marries her, and sadly she was killed when he was killed. Still hard to believe.
And Penny Marshall's brother was Gary Marshall. Talk about a talented guy. Look at that whole, what a family.
A lot of directing talk.
Bronx people too, the Marshalls.
All Bronx people. Yeah.
Oh yeah. You could hear it in their voice.
So being a West Coaster, Julian, via Chicago, and I really consider myself more of a West Coaster since I've been here since I was 4. For those of us who don't know, how do you distinguish somebody from the Bronx from somebody from Brooklyn or Manhattan? Is there a way?
Not that I know of, no, except if they tell you. But no, I mean, the fact is, though, that when you've grown up in New York, there's a secret handshake that somehow exists. And I think Arthur will adhere to that. I mean, agree with that. When Arthur and I met, we didn't know it, but we ended up living a couple of blocks apart. We grew up 2 blocks away from one another. And there's something about a New Yorker, it's going to be name dropping, but I was with Barbara Streisand in the Warner compound in Mexico. And we were in a hot tub together talking, and we had never met. And we glommed onto each other. But I said to her, "Do you remember egg creams?" And she said, "Sure." I said, I love that chocolate syrup. And she said, "You bet chocolate syrup." She was right. That was the name of the company. It was a U-bet. And that's what happens. There's some sort of connection if you've grown up in the Bronx and Brooklyn. And it's a big one.
And what you said, I've always believed, is Bronx and Brooklyn were similarity. It was almost the same. It was the same thing. Manhattan was not. Queens was not in those days. And
certainly Staten Island was nowhere.
Staten Island was never any part of what we're talking about. But the Bronx, half of the movie industry came from the Bronx. I'm sitting with Dick Donner in the Cannes Film Festival overlooking the Mediterranean Sea. I know he came from the Bronx, and I came from the Bronx. Whereas in the Bronx, and once you get into it with a fellow Bronxite, you're in the Grand Concourse, you're at Kingsbridge Road, you're at Yankee Stadium, you're at the hot dog place Gorman's on Fordham Road.
Arthur, here's a question.
It's fascinating.
For those of us who don't know it, what actually is a Bronx?
No, it's not that. It was the man who was one of the richest men in the early times, was named Jacob Brungs, and he lived uptown, because everything in those days was down in 14th Street, 18th, always downtown, and people would say, "We're going up to visit the Bronx," and that's how it became, because it's the only borough with the name the. There's the others are not the Queens or the Brooklyn.
Now, are you saying his last name was Bronk, just like
No,
Bronx?
I think it was
X.
Bron,
X.
maybe KS or something. It was definitely not an X.
But it is an X today. It's
Yes, it's been X'd. It's been X'd out.
And both you and Arthur are natives of the Bronx?
We certainly are.
Yes, born and raised.
I'll tell you guys a quick story. I'm at a dinner for F. Murray Abraham, and I'm sitting next to Holly Hunter, who I've never met. And I said to her something to the effect, where did you grow up? And she grew up near Atlanta in some little town. And she said, what about you? I said, well, I grew up in the Bronx. This is an area you wouldn't know. And she said, no, I would know. I said, you would know? Why would you know? I said, do you ever hear of Marshallou Parkway? And she said, yeah. It was right next to DeWitt Clinton High School. I almost fall over. How is this possible? I said, how is this? Tell me, what is it? She said, I'm a struggling actress. My girlfriend and I have taken an apartment in the Bronx because that's all we could afford. And she said, and my roommate was Frances McDormand. So that you just don't know. You just don't know who you're talking to. I was so taken aback that she knew anything about the Bronx, let alone where I went to high school, as it turned out.
And so my partner and I were part of the original financing group to the Coen brothers, their first 4 movies. And we had a piece of this distribution of Blood Simple. But there came Raising Arizona, and there is when I met Frances, who's a great actress, and introduced to Holly Hunter on the set in Scottsdale, Arizona. And I looked at this girl and we were talking, and she talked out of the side of her mouth. And I said to myself, this girl is a female Buddy Hackett. He talked like, he's talking like, you'd never figure, she became a star too, great actress, Julian.
So listen, we could probably talk about Rob's work another hour, but in putting a pin in it, Rob Reiner will always be remembered as one of our great talents in Hollywood. The nice thing about the movie business is his work will be with us forever. So we certainly respect that, and we can now talk about movies we've seen this week or these last 2 weeks that we've enjoyed. I have to tell you that I saw 2 film noirs last week that I thought were terrific. I saw it on the Channel 13 movie channel, which I think is syndicated around the country. One of them was called The Big Heat with Glenn Ford. I highly recommend it.
And Gloria Graham.
Exactly. It takes something terribly tragic happens to Gloria Graham in that movie. Just crazy. And then the other movie I saw was called Vice Squad with Edward G. Robinson. Another terrific film noir. If you guys are listening, if you see the Vice Squad or just Vice Squad or The Big Heat, I've been really feasting on catching up on film noir because I have seen just a few in my life. I've made a point of it the last year to watch more of those wonderful crime melodramas from the 40s and 50s.
Well, I hope you've seen Double Jeopardy,
yes,
which is probably one of the greatest. And
it's
how about the original DOA with Edmund O'Brien?
Edmund O'Brien, exactly.
Have you seen that one?
Oh, yeah.
Well,
I have a DVD.
You've seen 2 of the best then.
Oh, yeah. And the other favorite of mine is The Asphalt Jungle, directed by John Huston.
With
Arthur,
an incredible
what have you
small
seen?
role of Marilyn Monroe.
Right, of course. Miss Finley. Arthur, what have you seen this week that you can talk about?
I can tell you that I fell into a movie that everybody's seen, and I hadn't seen it in quite some time. And again, it's one of those movies that you say, how could you not make this kind of movie again? Well, Jerry Maguire. Jerry Maguire is a perfect movie. Tom Cruise. There he is. Demi Moore. No, not Demi Moore.
Renee Zellweger.
Renee Zellweger. She was great.
By the way, if that movie had been made in the 40s, how fast would they have changed Renee Zellweger's name?
Right. Well, no, but Jerry Maguire is a great movie. There's a little role in the film played by the male babysitter, a young guy who's wearing Gotke shorts and sneakers, and he's a crazy jazz fan. It's just a little nothing thing that, was a standout. It's a great movie. It's a perfect movie. I can't believe too many people haven't seen it. All you guys, I'm sure, have seen Jerry Maguire.
You can't mention Jerry Maguire without mentioning Cuba Gooding Jr. Show me the money.
Great.
Yes, that's right. I think two of the best lines about money. Mel Brooks says, "I want that money."
What about you, Julian? What have you seen lately that you can tell?
Oh God, I went back to see one of my favorite movies of all time, Charade. Cary Grant, Audrey Hepburn, James Coburn, George Kennedy, Ned Glass, and Walter Matthau not eating the scenery. Fantastic.
Henry Mancini.
Henry Mancini's music. But, that's out Hitchcocking Hitchcock in many ways. There's more surprises in that movie. I forgot how many surprises and shocks there are in that film. What I didn't forget was watching two of the most beautiful people who walk the planet Earth physically and as actors in Cary Grant and Audrey Hepburn. Oh, my God. And there was a famous story, I think I may have mentioned it on one of the shows I do, was that Cary Grant loved the script but wouldn't do it because he did not want to play the man that old pursuing a young girl. He just found it was, and so they agreed to make Audrey Hepburn the aggressor, so to speak. And there's plenty of references to his age and her being a kid. So that's how he did the movie. But boy, what a terrific movie that is.
Was Walter Matthau a star by that time?
No, but I don't think he had made Odd Couple. He may have done it on Broadway. But anyhow, he certainly was a co-star. He was very good in A Face in the Crowd, for example, but he wasn't the lead in that either. But in this movie, he was third lead and did very, very well.
It shocked me in seeing some of Walter's earlier movies. I saw him play a heavy in a movie called The Kentuckian with Burt Lancaster. And
that's right.
He handles that bullwhip in a ferocious way. What about you, Mike? What have you seen this week that you can tout?
A couple different movies, actually. The first one we watched was in honor of the passing of Catherine O'Hare. She recently passed away. We watched A Mighty Wind, which is a wonderful Chris Guest movie. And it's just a great movie about folk music. Judy and I, for our first dance at our wedding, actually danced to one of the songs that Catherine O'Hare actually sang with. It was really, really awesome. And so such a wonderful movie, and just all of Chris Guest's movies are great, and they're kind of tied in because, he started doing the improv movies based off of what he did with Rob Reiner in Spinal Tap.
Spinal Tap, right, of course.
And then I also watched, in honor of this episode that we were going to do, I actually watched the movie Stand By Me, which is such a great, great film. And, for an early movie by Rob Reiner, the direction in this and the kid actors were just amazing. River Phoenix, Will Wheaton, Jerry, what's Jerry's last name?
Jerry O'Connell.
Jerry O'Connell, and of course, and they were all great. Keith Sutherland, there's just so much great.
What about that song, film. Mike?
Yeah, Stand By Me is just Benny King. It's just a wonderful song. So yeah, it's just
for such a young filmmaker, he was just such a polished movie, just so polished. And
Hey, you guys ever see a movie called The Darkest Hour with Gary Oldman?
Churchill.
Churchill, yeah.
About Winston Churchill?
oh,
Yeah, it's
sure,
wonderful.
sure.
Yeah.
He was marvelous. I think he won the Oscar for that.
He did.
I can't believe he didn't. He was unbelievable.
Unbelievable. Well, now
Yeah.
it's time to turn over our affairs to the master of the podcasts, the king of the lists, Mr. Mike Faber.
King of the lists? What list are you talking about?
I think I was watching the Night of the Seven Kingdoms, the new Game of Thrones series, and every day they're in the lists, but it has nothing to do with jousting. Although you do a little bit of jousting occasionally, so not far away.
Yeah, well, I have to joust with you guys every episode, so there you go, right there.
There you go.
You've reached the end of this episode of the Tales from Hollywoodland podcast. Always remember, we couldn't do this without you. We want to hear from you guys, so please write us anytime at talesfromhollywoodland@gmail.com. Remember, you can even find us wherever fine podcasts are found, and we even have a YouTube channel, so please check us out and like and subscribe if you get a chance. If you made it this far into the episode, like I just said, why not subscribe and give us a thumbs up? Or if you're listening to us on any of the podcast players, 5 stars would be really appreciated. If you're into social media, please follow us up on Instagram and Facebook. Before we get out of here, let's check with the guys on what's happening on their podcast. Julian, who are you talking to this episode?
This episode is Liza Lerner of Hollywood royalty. Her father was Alan J. Lerner, who wrote My Fair Lady, Gigi, Brigadoon, Faint Your Wagon. Her mother was Nancy Olson, William Holden's girlfriend in Sunset Boulevard. And also Nancy was in many other movies with John Wayne, Fred McMurray, Glenn Ford. So she is Hollywood royalty, and she has wonderful stories of the making of Gigi and My Fair Lady and her own producing. She produced a bunch of shows on Broadway. So she's a wonderful gal. I've known her for years, and I'm glad she could join me.
What a day this has been. What a rare mood I'm in.
It's almost like being in love.
Talented
That's from Brigadoon.
That's Alice. That's
There you
Lerner
go.
Lowe.
Steve, what do you got over on Saturday night at the movies?
Well, speaking of movies that are delightful, I talked to author Michael Clasterin, who's written the ultimate book on Back to the Future. It's called Back to the Future, The Ultimate Visual History. This book can double as a barbell. It weighs about 5 pounds. And he tells us wonderful stories about the making of Back to the Future and the 2 sequels. And Mike and I both were unit publicists for the studios at the same time. He ended up becoming the unit publicist on Back to the Future 2 and 3. So it's a really wonderful look back on a movie that always delivers, whether you've seen it the first time or the 2000th time.
That is awesome.
Agreed.
Such a great movie. Such a great movie. And you could go into the whole thing about Eric Stoltz and all the recasting and reshooting that they had to do. And
He has photos of the Stoltz shoot. And, for those of you who don't know this, before they cast Michael J. Fox, they cast Eric Stoltz, who worked for 6 weeks shooting Back to the Future until they realized that he was totally wrong for the role. And they got they wanted Michael to begin with, but he was tied into that TV series Family Ties. But when they postponed everything and shot in a different direction, they came back to him and he was available.
That is awesome. And have any of you guys been watching the TV show? It's called Shrinking on Apple Plus. Michael J. Fox has been returned to acting in that series.
Oh, I'll have to check
and
it
everything.
out.
And he's been playing scenes with Harrison Ford. Really great stuff. Well, thank you guys for listening tonight. On behalf of Steve, Arthur, and Julian, thanks again for listening. This is your producer and announcer, Mike Faber. We'll see you here next time on Tales from Hollywoodland. Your Hollywood adventure starts right here.
We're Sean and Leah, and this is Have Coffee, Will Travel.
The show where caffeine fuels our hot takes on movies, pop culture, travel misadventures, and whatever weird thing happened in the news this week.
Basically, we drink coffee and pretend it makes us smarter.
It doesn't, but it does make us funnier.
So grab your mug.
And your sense of adventure.
And
join us for Have Coffee, Will Travel. Because life's too short for bad coffee and boring podcasts.
This has been a broadcast of the ESO Network. Be part of the crew and help support our shows by donating to our ESO Patreon or by shopping at the TeePublic store, which can all be found at www.esonetwork.com. The ESO Network, your station for all things geek.